Hi, welcome to our second session in the Looking After Your Mental Health in a Pandemic course. Last week, I introduced this very simple, even simplistic model of our mental health. That our mental health is a mixture of those thoughts, emotions, and feelings that are helpful and good for us, and those thoughts, emotions, and feelings that are harmful or bad for us, harm others, or good for us and good for others. And basically, the model says that when we are struggling with our mental health is when we have more of the unhelpful than the helpful, and vice versa. I illustrated with a box of eggs, and so you could have this box of eggs, and those are either good and healthy, and they'll do you good, and you can make good things with them, or they're rotted and gone off, and they'll only be harmful and not good for you. And in reality, maybe our thoughts and emotions or feelings are not always completely bad and completely healthy. Maybe they're somewhere in between. But you understand the model. And this diagram shows how two people might be. Now, we might say the person on the left is obviously unwell, and because they have an overwhelming proportion of unhelpful thoughts, emotions, and feelings. And the person on the right, well, they're well. But actually, we know that every person is at least a little bit of a mess. Everybody is a mixture. And actually, if we feel like the person on the right is the normal person, then we're ignoring in reality that we are all messy. There is no such thing as being normal. I want to look at difference and disorder. Difference is simply the fact that we are all different. We all have different personalities. We all have different preferences. Whatever our circumstances, because of our genetics, because of how we're made up, because of our history, we are different people. Sometimes it's hard for us to know the difference between disorder and difference. We might think that the thing that is wrong with us is a problem, whereas actually it's our personality. We might be somebody who is more introverted, likes to spend more time refreshing, renewing their energy on their own. We might think that's a disorder. Well, it's not a disorder. That's just how we are. And actually, this model that we just looked at that says, is that harmful for us? Wanting to spend time on our own, have that preference? No, it's not a disorder, it's just our personality. So we need to be aware that as we look at harmful thoughts and feelings, that alongside that comes our personality. And let me give a personal example. I am generally optimistic. What that means is that I have a kind of belief, a hope that things will work out well. That's my personality. The flip side of that is that I get really disappointed when things don't work out well. Excessively disappointed when people get hurt or things don't function correctly. The disorder is the excessive disappointment. I should get a bit disappointed, but I get really disappointed. And that's partly from my personality, it's related to my personality, but actually, it's a disordered, unhelpful thought that comes on top of that. Do you see how those two are interrelated, but also we need to treat them a little bit differently? So let's explore how we can know if our thoughts and feelings are those harmful eggs, those ones that have gone bad, or those helpful ones, those ones that are tasty. How can we know the difference? Well, let me give the example of anxiety. And we know that anxiety in itself, as an emotion, as a feeling, as a thought, is not bad. It's useful. Anxiety helps us prepare. It helps us care about what is happening. It's not in itself harmful. When it simply has a really negative effect on us, then we know that it's a disordered emotion, thought, and feeling. When anxiety stops us from doing things that we should be able to do, we know that's harmful. When it means that we are unable to make a decision, that we should be able to make, we know that it's harmful. That's the balance between emotion and whether or not it's a harmful or unharmful one. Now, some emotions can be so extreme that it's very rare that they will be helpful for us. A complete loathing, a complete despair will very rarely be at the helpful end of that spectrum. The tool I want to introduce to us is the Know What You Are Feeling tool. Very simply, it's about us knowing what we're feeling. Let me explain. Say that one morning you are feeling sad. It means you can't get out of bed. You call up your job, you call in sick. You'd be meant to meeting a friend for coffee at lunch, and you cancel the coffee. You don't wash your clothes that you're planning to wash that day. You don't pay the bill that you know needed paying by that day. Instead, you grab an excessive amount of ice cream from the freezer and binge on Netflix all day long. At the end of the day, you just feel a whole lot worse than you did at the beginning. Not only are you feeling sad, but now also you're feeling that you haven't achieved anything, and you're just probably going to feel pretty miserable. What might begin to help us is to say, what am I feeling this day? What is going on for me? I'm depressed today. You might not think of this as a tool, but actually it's the foundation of how we can manage, work with, look after our thoughts, emotions, and feelings, is to have that self-honesty about what is going on. And actually having others, trustworthy, wise friends, companions involved can be really helpful as well. Because say that friend that you were meant to meet for a coffee, maybe you message them in the morning and saying, I just feel rubbish. I just feel really sad today. Can't get out of bed. I've called in sick. Somebody else now cares about you, is interested in you, and knows how you're feeling. They say, oh, you're depressed today. I'm really sorry to hear about that. They might be able to support you. But it has to start with you trying to understand what you're feeling that day. That will be our most foundational and useful tool. It's very simple, and sometimes it can be really, really hard for us to face up to it. Just want to get on with whatever it is in our lives. Stop and think, what are you feeling? It's something I do. I say to Hannah, my wife, I'm feeling sad today. And this might be why. I'm worried today about such and such. I feel really worried. I'm stressed, and I think it might be because of this. I just try and understand what is going on for me and try and share that with others. Next week, we're going to look a little bit more begin to look a little bit more about what it means to involve other people in what our thoughts and feelings and emotions are. I want to explore 4 models of what is going on for us in our minds. And the first is neurological. That means simply our brains, what is happening in the very smallest level. Of the 100 billion, it's a lot of neurons that we have inside our brains, those tiny, tiny little cells that are all connected in with each other. And it's those connections, it's how they connect and how they interact that are simply our thoughts, emotions, and feelings. And I'm sure we know that the different levels of chemicals in our brains, around our brains, and around our bodies, whether or not they're the naturally occurring chemicals or ones that we introduce to our body, like alcohol or caffeine, affect how those cells interact, both on the big level and also on the tiny level of them connecting to each other. At its most simple, when we have harmful or helpful thoughts, emotions, and feelings, it's because of how those cells are interacting helpfully or unhelpfully, how they're connected in good ways or unhelpful ways. And so that brings us on to the second model, which is the genetic model. And this says simply that we inherit from our parents some of the things about how we are wired to think and feel. It's not just our height that comes from our genetics, but it could be things like an adventurous character. an interest in mechanics. It could be to do with a inclination to be more anxious or courageous or depressed. Those things are inherited in our genes and then are wired into our brains, affect how our brains are wired and fit together. Research over many years through separating twins at birth has shown actually that our genetics, our parents' genes coming to us, have a significant effect on our thoughts, emotions, and our feelings throughout our life. The third model is almost the opposite of the genetic model, and this is our history, our personal history, the lives that we have lived since we have been people. And I was reading this week a psychologist, a Christian psychologist actually, who was talking about very simplistically, but I think it's the truth as well, that how much we have been affirmed and encouraged by our parents, those around us as we're growing up, will severely affect our self worth, how much we have a realistic understanding of our goodness, our skills, our experience, our gifts, and those things that aren't good, the things that we are unhelpful habits and things like that. And having a realistic understanding of that will be really influenced by how we have been treated as children by parents and teachers and those around us. That's our history. And this, when we have this model of our minds, then we're really interested in all the different things that have happened to us over the past years. This is the classic psychotherapist lying on the couch asking you all about your childhood and what's going on in order to understand what is going on now. It's really important. Our history makes a big difference to what we're thinking and feeling now. And the fourth model is what I like to call the conflicts or demands model. And this is very much brings you to here and now. What is going on for you at the moment? We'll explore this a bit more next week. It's not that the other models aren't helpful, and in fact, we can work in each of those models in order to look after our mental health in different ways. But this one is one we're going to particularly focus on because it brings us down to what is happening to us day by day, week by week. Simply put, this model says we're walking around, living our lives, and there are different demands on our minds every day. From the most basic, hunger, thirst, up to being hot or cold, uncomfortable or comfortable, those actually really affect our minds, our thoughts and our feelings and emotions. To those things that are more clearly at the mental level, I'm worried about the bill that I was meant to pay today. I'm excited about eating the curry this evening. I am confused about whether or not I'm loved by my new girlfriend. Those are things that are happening to us that affect our thoughts, emotions, and feelings could be a very complicated way. And then it can be on the more difficult level that we have demands on our minds. We could be watching a program about child abuse, and as we watch that reminds us and makes us afraid that we will revisit the suffering that we have had as a child. It could be that we say something ill thought of in a conversation, people laugh at us or mock us or misunderstand us, and that makes us believe that we are evil. Demands that have come in from our lives, things that are happening to us and affect our thoughts, emotions, and feelings. And what we'll be seeing in the coming few weeks is how we can understand and work with those conflicts and those demands on us. Lastly, I want to look at our next disorder in the top 5, and that is depression. And this is characterized by low mood. I always think that's a funny phrase, low mood, but it's the opposite of high, excitable, happy mood. Loss of enjoyment, low energy, when it's difficult to think positively about the future. And this can be a short-term thing, and it can be a relatively low-level kind of thing, or it can be deep and profound for many, many years. I have a good friend who's a vicar in Edinburgh, and He has been living with severe clinical depression for over 30 years, through seasons of it being less intense and profound and more intense and profound. And he talks very openly about his clinical depression. He's a Christian. He leads one of the largest and most successful churches in the Anglican Church in Scotland. Yet he has had and has today a very high need for very high doses of antidepressants and a huge weight that he has to bear. He talks of a deep, dark despair, overwhelming anxiety, total hopelessness, day in, day out. Mornings fighting through despondency, days of despondency, evenings are free to fall asleep, not knowing what mornings could bring. Depression can be triggered by a one-off event or by long-term unhelpful thought patterns. For others, it may be more of a physical illness. Occasionally, depression could have a spiritual cause. Many people don't know how it has come about for them. And just like with every other mental health disorder, it's not really very helpful for us to compare ourselves to others. Everybody will suffer from depression if they do in a slightly different way. One of the things that Malcolm has found most helpful was having and making use of an effective therapist. And we'll look again, as I mentioned, next week at how people can be helpful for us. He's also found that medication can mean that he can function, do his job, be the father and husband he wants to be. And I just want to mention that Malcolm has found, and this has been my experience as well, in the church there are a very high proportion of people who suffer from depression, including a number of clergy that I know. When I've spoken on depression in services, this is often the sermon that gets the highest number of responses from people who want to stand up, as it were, and say, that's me. And yet it is in the church that sometimes can be the hardest place to admit that we are facing depression. That it seems like everything should be good news and excitement and Jesus alive and he reigns and we've got hope for all eternity, and yet that is not what we're feeling. If that's you, then I am sorry that you struggle in that way, and I hope that we will be able to help you over the coming weeks.